After a brutal execution in 1961, the blood of a cursed man refuses to stay buried. And now, during the full moon, it's calling for vengeance. I'm Mr. Midnight Hollow, your terrifying host. If you're already part of our pack, your support means everything to us. Each like, comment, and share helps uncover more stories like this. Or subscribe to see what rises from the depths of darkness and unfolds before you. Now, let's begin. The summer of 1961 in Asheville, North Carolina was hotter than most. The kind of heat that made the pine sap boil and the insects shriek louder than the church bells on Sunday morning. Back then, the outskirts of town were mostly farmland and dense woods, places where secrets could rot undisturbed and screams could vanish into the trees. There was a man, or at least that's what people called him. No one knew where he came from. He appeared one spring, silent and strange, walking barefoot through the dirt roads that led from Pisgah National Forest to the broken fences of the old Withers farm. His name, according to the faded ID found in his coat, was Thaddeus Vance. Thaddeus kept to himself, slept in the woods, ate what he hunted. Locals claimed he spoke to animals, raccoons, deer, even the wolves that roamed deeper in the forest. There were whispers that he wasn't right, not just mentally. Something darker. Something unnatural. That year, during the full moons of June and July, 3 children disappeared. The last one was found in August, or what was left of her. Katie Wilkes, 9 years old, dragged from her bedroom window into the woods behind her house. Her body was discovered 2 days later, curled beneath a fallen oak, spine snapped, throat torn open, her small chest hollowed out like a hunter dressing a deer. That was the final straw. Sheriff Harold Griggs, Heather's grandfather, didn't wait for a warrant. He rallied 9 men, farmers, veterans, church elders, and they hunted Thaddeus down. They found him sleeping in a cave near Bent Creek, naked, his face and chest caked with dry blood. There was no trial, no official arrest. They tied him up, dragged him to the clearing behind the old railroad tracks, and built a bonfire with wood and kerosene. When he awoke, he didn't scream. He just stared at them, his eyes golden, like a dog backed into a corner. They said the fire burned for hours, that his body didn't flinch or cry, that he just stared at them until the flames took his face. Sheriff Griggs swore he heard words, not screams, coming from the fire. A promise, spoken in a tongue none of them could understand. That was the last time anyone spoke of Thaddeus Vance. His name was removed from every record. The cave was sealed with rocks. And the land where he burned was sold for $1 and left to rot. The town moved on. The murders were written off as animal attacks. Asheville grew, tourists came, students filled the college, Starbucks replaced the hardware stores. But the woods never changed. 64 years later, that same piece of land behind the railroad tracks was now owned by a housing development company. But nature had a way of holding its ground. Every attempt to build on that soil failed. Machinery broke down. Workers got sick. A man lost his hand when a chainsaw kicked back without warning. And then, just before the latest survey, they found bones. Not old animal bones, human, charred, curled like they died in agony, right beneath the spot where the fire once burned. When the discovery made the news, the surviving men from 1961, those still breathing, fell silent. One of them, Arthur Deal, was interviewed by a local podcast the day after the story broke. He told them the truth about Thaddeus, about what they did. The episode never aired. 2 days later, Arthur was found in his home. He had slit his own throat, but the position of the body didn't make sense. There were scratch marks on the walls, as if he'd tried to climb the ceiling. His eyes were missing, Heather Griggs, a crime scene investigator from Charleston, South Carolina, received a call that night. Her father had died, and she'd inherited his cabin just outside Asheville. It had been abandoned for years. She hadn't spoken to him since he had a stroke 5 years earlier. She arrived 2 days later, in the middle of October. The air was cold and wet, the sky overcast, the forest thick and silent. The key still worked. The cabin smelled like mildew and something else, sweet, rotting, like spoiled meat. Inside, the power was off, but the place had been untouched. Furniture under white sheets, photos of her grandfather in uniform. And one thing out of place, a thick folder on the kitchen table, sealed in plastic, labeled Vance. Inside were photographs, old ones. Black and white images of the bonfire, blurry shots of a figure tied to a stake, newspaper clippings about the missing children, and a note written in trembling hand. He wasn't dead. The fire only slowed him. The blood calls during the full moon. Don't stay here, Heather. Don't dig. Don't remember. Outside, the wind picked up. Something moved in the trees. And behind her, just outside the window, barely visible, 2 golden eyes reflected in the glass. 3 days after Heather arrived in Asheville, the first body was found. Ralph Kessler, a forest ranger with over 25 years of experience, didn't radio in that morning. His last known location was along one of the lesser-known trails on the southern side of Pisgah National Forest, an area closed off to the public due to recent landslides. When his truck was found near the trailhead, unlocked and engine cold, a search was launched. They found him a quarter-mile in, just past a moss-covered bridge. At first, it didn't look like a human body. The torso had been torn in half and pinned to a tree trunk with a branch shoved through the spine like a grotesque trophy. His legs were 30 feet away, slumped over a log, boots still on. His sidearm was missing. His face was gone, ripped clean from the skull, as if peeled off in one violent motion. The sheriff's department sealed off the area within hours, but whispers had already started. Rangers talked about the smell, copper and wet fur, and how the blood hadn't just pooled, it had sprayed, as if something large had shaken Ralph before slamming him against the tree. Heather heard about it on the local news, sitting alone in the cabin, the folder still open on the table. The anchorman said it was a possible animal attack, that bears had been sighted closer to residential areas lately due to weather changes. She didn't believe it. That night, she walked the perimeter of the property. Something was off. The wind carried a scent, faint but distinct, a mix of burnt wood and blood. And the woods no longer felt quiet. They felt like they were watching. Inside, she re-examined the old photos. One in particular held her attention. Her grandfather, standing in front of a fire, holding a flashlight in one hand and a shotgun in the other. Behind him, 9 shadows, all men. In the center of the fire, a figure, arms bound, head bowed, smoke curling around him like a crown. The note echoed in her mind. He wasn't dead. The fire only slowed him. She didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because of the feeling she wasn't alone. The following evening, she drove into town to meet with Daniel Rooker, a retired journalist who once wrote an article about the Shadow Man of Asheville, a local legend tied to disappearances dating back to the 60s. Daniel agreed to meet her in a diner off Patton Avenue. "You're Griggs's girl," he said, sipping burnt coffee. "Didn't think I'd ever see one of you come back." Heather opened the folder. "Tell me about Thaddeus Vance." He glanced around. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for a worn notebook. They called him a monster, but there was more to it. There were sightings before the killings. Big animal, walking on 2 legs, fur like ash, eyes like gold. Locals thought it was just myth, until the kids died. You believe it was him? Daniel nodded. I believe they burned a man, but they didn't kill what he was. Heather leaned in. What was he? He paused, voice lowering. A werewolf, but not the Hollywood kind. This was something older, something that didn't just kill. It hunted bloodlines. You get rid of it once and it waits, sleeps in the dirt. Comes back when the blood's strong again. Heather frowned. What do you mean, bloodlines? Daniel's eyes locked on hers. I mean, if your grandfather helped kill it, it's not just after the men who lit the fire. It's after everyone tied to them. Heather left shortly after, her thoughts spiraling. That night she received a call from the sheriff's office. Another body had been found, this time a college student. Ryan McClelland, age 22. He was hiking with friends in the forest. He separated from the group to relieve himself. Never came back. They found him an hour later. His body had been ripped from shoulder to waist. His chest cavity exposed, ribs snapped open like wings. His face looked frozen in terror. One hand was gone. The other was pointing toward the tree line. The forensic team found animal tracks, but they were wrong. They started as paw prints and ended as bare human feet. That same night, Heather heard something outside her cabin. A low, steady growl. Her flashlight flickered as she stepped onto the porch. Nothing was there. But on the edge of the trees, just where the moonlight touched the dirt, something had been standing. She could see it, not its body, but the shape it left in the disturbed leaves. The heavy, deliberate impressions, clawed toes, upright stride. It was watching her, marking her. She grabbed her grandfather's old shotgun from the wall, hands shaking, and that's when she saw it. Carved into the wooden frame of the cabin door, as if scratched in by a blade or claw, blood for fire. Heather didn't leave the cabin the next morning. The scratches on the door weren't a prank. They were deep, cut through the outer wood as if done with something far sharper than a knife. She traced the words again, blood for fire. They hadn't been there the day before. She took pictures, sent them to a contact back in Charleston who worked in forensic linguistics. The message was clear. Someone, or something, remembered what happened in 1961. But there was something else eating at her. The footprints. Before the wind washed them away, she measured them. Each print was nearly 16 inches long, with 5 long toes, 3 more dominant than the others, and curved indentations where claws had dug deep into the dirt. The stride was impossible. 6 feet between steps, moving in a straight line toward the trees. Heather had seen enough crime scenes to know when something wasn't human. She drove to the sheriff's office later that afternoon. Sheriff Muncie was younger than she expected. Early 40s, ex-military, all nerves and no bullshit. His office was quiet, blinds drawn. The smell of cheap air freshener tried and failed to cover the scent of stress and black coffee. I know who you are, he said without looking up. Griggs's granddaughter, the CSI from Charleston. Let me guess. You think this is connected to your family. Heather sat down and placed the folder labeled Vance on the table between them. You have no idea what's coming. Muncie leaned back. Lady, I've got a town spooked out of their minds. 2 mangled bodies in 3 days, and a governor breathing down my neck. Unless you've got a silver bullet in that file, keep your ghost stories to yourself. She opened the folder to the photos. Showed him the marks on the cabin, the footprints, the historic report on the burning in '61, and finally, the journal entry from Arthur Deal, the man who slit his throat after talking about Vance. Muncie's jaw tightened. Let's say I believe this, he said finally. You telling me we're dealing with a goddamn werewolf? Not a werewolf, Heather corrected. The werewolf. She left the sheriff with the folder, told him to contact Daniel Rooker if he wanted more. Then she drove out to the cabin where the second victim had died, Ryan McClelland. It was still roped off, but Heather had credentials. She knew what she was looking for. Blood stained the soil in long streaks, like he'd been dragged. The attack hadn't ended where his body was found. It had started 20 feet up the slope. She walked the path backward, counted the gouges in the earth, followed the broken branches, and then she found it. A piece of flesh, small, gray, covered in coarse fur, almost like it had been torn from the creature itself. She bagged it, drove back to town, and stopped when she saw the fire trucks. The sheriff's station was burning. Flames poured from the windows. Smoke rolled across the street like a storm cloud. She parked and ran toward the crowd gathering nearby, just as Sheriff Muncie stumbled out, face covered in soot, eyes wide. "It took the folder," he said between coughs. "It broke through the back door. Wasn't a man, wasn't an animal. I shot it." Point blank, it didn't bleed. Heather grabbed him by the shoulders. "What do you mean it took the folder?" Muncie stared back at her, trembling. It knew where it was. It was looking for the names, the men from 1961. The fire didn't stop until the entire station was gutted. The hard drive containing the scanned photos, the paper records, the handwritten notes. All of it. Gone. That night, Heather returned to the cabin and locked every door. Boarded the windows. Turned on every flashlight she had. And waited. She didn't have to wait long. At 3:17 a.m., a noise came from the woods, a low, grinding growl that vibrated through the walls. Then silence. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "Do you remember how he screamed?" She turned off the phone, checked the back window. Nothing. And then she saw the lights outside. Flashlights. 3 of them. Someone, or something, was circling the cabin. She grabbed the shotgun and backed into the hallway. Heard a voice. "Heather, open the door." A man's voice. Calm, familiar. But her grandfather was dead. She raised the shotgun, heart racing. The front doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately, then stopped. A knock followed. And then from behind the house, a scream. Not human. She turned and ran toward the back window, catching a glimpse of something enormous lurching through the woods. Not running, stalking. It had returned. Not just to kill, to hunt, one by one. Heather didn't sleep again. The knock on the door haunted her more than the creature's growl. It wasn't just trying to get in, it was trying to trick her. It wanted her to open that door willingly. And the voice, that voice had sounded exactly like her grandfather. By morning, she packed up and drove straight to the Asheville Historical Archives. If the fire had destroyed every official document tied to the 1961 incident, maybe someone had stored private copies. She was right. Tucked in a forgotten drawer labeled Local Folklore, Pisgah Region, was a faded manila envelope with names handwritten across the top. Wilkes, Deal, Griggs, Morton, Kendrick, Lawton, Delaney, Polk, Devers. 9 men, the same 9 who stood around the fire. Inside the envelope was something else. A map. It was hand-drawn, charcoal on yellowed paper. It showed the location of the bonfire. But what caught Heather's attention was the circle drawn just south of the burn site, marked in red ink. "Remains buried here. Do not disturb." She drove there immediately. It was miles off the highway, through thick forest roads only accessible with a 4x4. The area was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the constant hum of unease crawling up her spine. She found the site by noon, a clearing in the trees, black soil, scattered ash. In the center, a ring of old stones, moss-covered and half-sunken. She knelt and dug. It wasn't far down, less than 3 feet. The stench hit her first. Rotting leather, rusted metal, and something sweeter. Foul. Human. Then she uncovered the bones. They weren't like any skeleton she'd ever seen. The skull was elongated, jaw extended, with too many teeth. The rib cage had been shattered outward. The femurs were thicker than a man's, but shaped wrong, like an animal forced into bipedal form. Claw marks were carved into the inside of the stone circle. It had tried to crawl out. She photographed everything, marked coordinates, packed a small piece of the skull into a sealed evidence bag. As she stood, wind pushed through the trees, and for the first time, she heard it. A voice, soft and rasping, from beneath the dirt. The fire was not enough. She spun around, shotgun raised. Nothing. Just trees and her own rapid breath. That night the dreams returned. She was standing in fire. Bound to a stake, faces stared at her from the shadows. Her grandfather. The other 8 men, all smiling. Then the flames parted, and it stepped forward, 7 feet tall, muscles stretched under mangled flesh, fur matted with blood, golden eyes that pierced through the fire. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. She woke, gasping. Across the room, her evidence bag had been torn open. The piece of skull was gone. The next day, another man died. Jacob Morton, 84 years old, the only surviving son of Malcolm Morton, one of the original 9. He'd been found in his home, body torn from groin to jaw, pinned to the ceiling with kitchen knives through both hands. His skin had been flayed in a perfect circle from the chest outward. On the wall, in blood, 8 remain. Sheriff Muncie called Heather that morning. "They're being hunted," he said. "And so are you." "I already know," she answered. He hesitated. "What do we do?" She stared out the window at the tree line. "We find the others," she said. "We warn them." "Even if they don't believe us?" She didn't respond. Because it didn't matter. The creature already knew their names, and one of them, someone still alive, was helping it. Heather spent the next 2 days tracking down descendants of the original 9. Most of them had moved away from Asheville decades ago, those who hadn't already died or disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Only 3 remained in the area. Walter Polk, retired mechanic, now living in a care facility on the outskirts of town. Eddie Devers, who ran a scrapyard near the old industrial district, and Pastor Lionel Kendrick, who still preached every Sunday at a small church near Hendersonville Road. She started with Polk. The nurse warned her he barely spoke anymore. Dementia, mostly. But the moment Heather showed him the photo of the bonfire, the one with his father standing near the flames, his eyes cleared, just for a second. "Fire didn't kill it," he whispered. "Just made it mad." "Do you remember what happened?" she asked. Polk didn't answer. Instead, he reached under his blanket and pulled out an old rusted locket. Inside was a photo of a man, tall, thin, bearded. On the back, scratched by hand, "Forgive me, Thaddeus." That afternoon, she visited Eddie Devers. His place was a wreck, junk piled 10 feet high, engines rusting in the grass, dogs barking somewhere out back. He came to the door shirtless, grease-stained, smoking. "You're Griggs, girl," he muttered. "I thought I smelled the past." Heather showed him the same photo. He stared at it for a long time. "My father said it wasn't a man," he finally said. "Said it was something ancient. The forest gave it form, and we gave it blood. You knew it would come back." Eddie exhaled, long and slow. "We hoped it would." She didn't understand. Why would you want that? Because the fire didn't cleanse anything. It cursed us all. Maybe this is the only way to end it. That night, another death. Not an elder. A child, 12 years old. Grandson of Lionel Kendrick. He never came home from school. They found his body just after midnight, hanging from the bell tower of his grandfather's church. Ripped apart. Skin peeled down his back like it had been unzipped. Eyes removed. Tongue placed in his own pocket. No witnesses, no sounds. Just blood and silence. On the floor beneath him, scratched into the wood with claws, sins passed through the blood. Pastor Kendrick collapsed when the news hit. He refused to speak to anyone, locked himself in the church. Sheriff Muncie called Heather, voice shaking. It's not just killing, it's sending messages. It's executing them, Heather replied. One by one. And if it's going after descendants, then it's not stopping until every drop of blood tied to the 9 is spilled. They met that evening at the burnt remains of the sheriff's office, digging through what was left of the hard drives and files. One small USB had survived. Inside, a single video clip, grainy security cam footage. Heather watched it 5 times. It showed the back hallway of the station, empty at first. Then the lights flickered. A shadow moved across the far wall. No footsteps. No sound. Then it appeared. 7 feet tall, fur black and burned at the tips, long arms, curved claws, its face half covered in scar tissue, mouth torn into a permanent snarl. It turned its head directly toward the camera and smiled. Heather froze the frame, zoomed in, the eyes, gold, like her grandfather's dog after a kill. Only worse. I've seen those eyes before, Muncie muttered. Heather nodded slowly. So have I. She didn't tell him when, because deep down she feared the truth. She'd seen them reflected in her own eyes, just once, during a childhood fever that lasted 3 days. Her grandfather had sat by her bed the whole time, murmuring something in a language she'd never heard since. It was no coincidence the creature was after her too. She wasn't just a Griggs. She might be something else. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Thunder without lightning. Winds that screamed through the trees but never touched the leaves. The sky above Asheville darkened in a way that felt unnatural, like something watching from beyond had finally blinked. Heather sat alone in the cabin, the shotgun across her lap, and the torn journal she'd taken from the ashes of the sheriff's office spread before her. It wasn't just notes. It was a confession. Her grandfather had written the truth in 1986, shortly after his first stroke. Hidden in coded language, but the message was clear. Thaddeus Vance wasn't just some wild man accused of murder. He was something far older, bound to the land by blood rituals forgotten even by the ones who practiced them. And her grandfather had known exactly what he was burning. He wore the shape of a man to walk among us, but the forest gave him teeth when the moon rose. We tried to burn the beast, but the man screamed louder than the monster. Heather stared at one page for a long time. It listed the 9 names again. But next to Thaddeus Vance, written in red ink, Original Blood, Vessel, Host, the First. She turned to her laptop and began searching. There was no record of Thaddeus Vance before 1958. No birth certificate, no family, nothing. But she found something else. A newspaper clipping from 1903 titled Massacre in Yancey County. 8 bodies torn apart in a remote cabin. 1 survivor. A child. Name redacted. Description matched. Dark hair, gold eyes, feral behavior. Claimed he heard the moon speaking before it happened. No charges were filed. The child vanished into the state system. Thaddeus Vance had never been born. He had always been. and someone had been protecting that secret for over a century. She called Muncie immediately. "We're not dealing with a curse," she said. "This is a bloodline, a host, passed down. And the host always finds its way back to the mountains." He paused. "So what are we dealing with?" Heather's voice was steady. "A being that doesn't die, just changes shape, waits, and if it's targeting descendants of the Nine, it's doing more than killing them. It's cleansing," Muncie finished. That day, Pastor Kendrick was found dead in his church, hung upside down from the rafters, throat chewed open, tongue nailed to the pulpit. Above his body, written in ash, "The blood of the shepherd feeds the return." At the scene, Heather examined the markings again. There were symbols burned into the floorboards, older than Latin, glyphs, tribal, but twisted into new forms. One of them pulsed when she touched it. A warmth spread through her skin, into her bones, and she heard a sound, not with her ears, but inside her skull. A voice. "Your blood remembers." She pulled away, gasping. Muncie saw her face. "What happened?" "I think it's trying to reach me." That night, Heather locked herself in the cabin and opened the last envelope from her grandfather's folder. It was labeled, "For Heather, only if I'm gone." Inside, a single photograph. It was her, not as a child, not as an adult, but as an infant, held in the arms of a man with long, wild hair, bare feet, and golden eyes. Thaddeus Vance. The back of the photo had one word, written in her grandfather's handwriting: "Daughter." Heather dropped the picture. The world tilted. She wasn't just a descendant. She was a direct line, not just being hunted, but claimed. And somewhere in the woods that night, the creature howled, not in hunger, not in rage, but in triumph. Heather didn't speak to anyone for the next 6 hours. She sat in the cabin's living room, staring at the photograph, hands trembling. She remembered dreams from her childhood, visions of running through woods, of blood on her hands, of moonlight burning her skin. Now they weren't dreams. They were memories. She was Thaddeus Vance's daughter, not by choice, not by lineage, but by ritual. Her mother had been a social worker, disappeared in 1989 without a trace. Her grandfather had raised her in silence, telling her she was abandoned, that her father had died in a fire. But that wasn't true. Her father had been the fire. And now, the blood inside her had begun to change. She felt it. At dusk, Heather left the cabin and drove out to meet Sheriff Muncie at the scrapyard where Eddie Devers lived. She found Muncie standing outside, flashlight in hand, jaw clenched. "What did you find?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, just led her through the maze of rusted metal and twisted wreckage until they reached the trailer in the back. The door was open. Inside, Eddie's body was hanging from the ceiling fan, disemboweled. His intestines had been arranged in a circle on the floor, and in the center, burned into the metal. One remains. Heather stepped outside and vomited. Muncie followed her. "That's it," he said. "It's down to you and Polk." Heather nodded, wiping her mouth. "And it's coming tonight." They drove together to the retirement home. The staff had no idea Polk was gone. The window in his room had been shattered. Blood smeared across the sill. A flashlight lay cracked on the floor, but no body. Heather walked the hallway in silence. Then she heard something, a dragging sound, coming from the basement. She and Muncie descended slowly, weapons ready. The air below was thick, moist, heavy with rot. At the bottom of the stairs, they found what was left of Walter Polk. He'd been crucified against the boiler system. Pipes jammed through his shoulders, his legs broken backwards. His face was gone, completely flayed, teeth ripped from his jaw and placed neatly in his lap. Carved into his chest. Now the blood returns. Muncie collapsed against the wall. Jesus Christ. Heather didn't look away. It's me now, she whispered. It was always you, came a voice from behind them. They spun, guns raised. Daniel Rooker stood there, hands up. Blood splattered across his shirt. I tried to stop it, he said, but it's too late. You helped it, Heather growled. I helped you, he corrected. You don't understand. You are it. What's inside you was never meant to be silenced. You're the last of the blood. You led it to them, Muncie snapped. Daniel nodded slowly. I only gave it what it wanted. Heather raised the shotgun. I should kill you. Daniel smiled. It's not me you should be worried about. A crash sounded above them, then another. The ceiling groaned. Something was inside the building, something massive. Heather ran, Muncie close behind. Daniel didn't follow. They reached the stairwell just as the creature dropped from the rafters, 7.5 feet tall, fur blackened with soot, bones visible beneath shredded muscle, golden eyes burning in the dark. It let out no sound, just charged. Heather fired, point blank. The shell hit its chest, flesh exploded. It staggered, but didn't fall. Muncie emptied his sidearm. Still, it moved. Heather grabbed him by the collar. Run! They burst through the exit into the night. Behind them, something tore through the wall. The werewolf, Thaddeus, not just a monster now, but whole, complete. Heather dove into the truck, started the engine, and peeled out as the creature bounded toward them. In the rearview mirror, she saw Daniel step into the parking lot. The werewolf didn't attack him. It walked up to him and stared, then turned its gaze toward the truck, toward her. It wasn't hunting anymore. It was coming home. Heather drove with the accelerator pressed to the floor, the truck roaring down the deserted mountain road. The tires struggled for traction as gravel spit out behind them. The creature was no longer chasing at full speed. She could see it through the rearview mirror, walking down the middle of the road with the slow confidence of something that knew it would catch her eventually. Muncie held his shoulder, blood running through his fingers. Heather, you need to tell me the truth. Are you turning into that thing? She kept her eyes on the road. No. That's not an answer. I don't know, she admitted, but I can feel something inside me, like a pull. Muncie looked at her, pale. If you start changing? I won't, she said. I'm not him. Are you sure? She didn't answer. They pulled onto an abandoned logging road deep in Pisgah Forest. The truck bounced violently over roots and potholes, but she didn't slow down until they reached a clearing overlooking a steep drop. The moon was full overhead, swallowing the sky in cold white light. Heather stepped out, shotgun in hand. The air was colder here. The trees felt older. The ground hummed beneath her boots. Muncie followed her, grimacing through pain. You brought us to a dead end. No, she said. I brought us to higher ground. The creature's footsteps approached long before it appeared. The forest parted around it. Trees bent, branches snapped under its weight. It walked into the clearing, massive, breathing steadily, eyes fixed on her. Heather felt her pulse match its rhythm. Muncie lifted his gun. If it comes closer, I shoot. It's not after you, Heather said quietly. Not now. Muncie kept the gun raised anyway. The creature stepped into the moonlight. Its burned patches healed as she watched, muscle knitting under skin, fur thickening. The sight stirred something inside her ribcage, a deep ache she didn't understand. Thaddeus spoke without moving his lips. His voice vibrated through the ground, through her bones. Come home. Her knees weakened. The bond was real. Her blood was calling to him. She gripped the barrel of the shotgun until her knuckles whitened. Muncie fired. The bullet struck the creature's shoulder, tearing away flesh, exposing bone. The werewolf staggered a single step. Then it turned toward the sheriff. Heather reacted instinctively. "Muncie, move!" But it was too late. Thaddeus lunged. One swipe. A blur. The sheriff was thrown across the clearing, hitting a tree trunk with a crack that echoed through the valley. He slumped to the ground, struggling to breathe, ribs shattered. Heather ran to him. "Muncie, stay with me." He grabbed her arm weakly. "You can't run. It wants you." She stood up slowly, turning to face the creature. "You want me?" she shouted. Thaddeus stepped toward her. Heather dropped the shotgun. She didn't need it. The moonlight pulsed. Her vision sharpened. She could hear her own heartbeat slowing, syncing with his. Then, for the first time, she felt the shift. Not bones breaking, not skin tearing, but awareness, strength, heat curling beneath her spine, instinct awakening like a second heartbeat she had ignored her entire life. She understood then. Thaddeus hadn't come to kill her. He'd come to claim her. Heather stepped forward. "What do you want from me?" The creature lowered its head, eyes burning like molten gold. "You are mine." The words hit her like a physical force. She shook her head. "No." She took another step. "No. I choose my own life." Thaddeus raised his arm to strike, claws glinting. Heather grabbed the hunting knife she'd strapped inside her jacket. And before the creature could react, she drove the blade into its side, not deep enough to kill, but enough to surprise. Thaddeus roared and stumbled backward. The wound smoked. The metal burned his flesh. Heather realized the truth instantly. The knife wasn't silver. It was steel. The metal didn't matter. It was her blood on the blade that hurt him, her lineage, her connection, her defiance. Thaddeus lunged at her and she rolled aside. His claws tore into the dirt where she had stood. She swung the knife again, cutting across his face, splitting open flesh that healed too slowly this time. Muncie called out from the ground, "Heather, finish it!" She tried. Thaddeus caught her arm, lifted her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. His claws pressed against her ribs. He didn't want her dead. He wanted her transformed. His breath brushed her cheek. "Accept what you are." Heather stabbed him again, this time in the throat. Thaddeus dropped her, stumbling backward, black blood pouring down his chest. But he wasn't dying. His eyes locked onto hers with something like pride. Soon. Then he stepped backward toward the edge of the cliff. Heather realized too late what he was about to do. "Wait!" Thaddeus fell, not like someone who slipped, but like someone who chose the drop. He vanished into the dark forest below. Heather ran to the edge. The cliff face plunged hundreds of feet into dense pines. The creature was nowhere in sight. Muncie crawled to her side. "Is it dead?" She shook her head. "No, he'll heal. It's what he does." Muncie stared at her. "Then what do we do now?" Heather looked out into the darkness. "He's not done," she whispered. "He didn't come to kill me. He came to wake me." The wind shifted. The trees swayed. Somewhere far below, something moved through the forest. She felt it. A pulse. Her blood answering his call. Heather stepped back from the cliff. "He's still out there," she said. "And he's waiting for me." Heather's descent into the legacy of blood and fire is a brutal reminder that some evils don't die. They just wait for the right blood to rise again. The age of the beast is far from over, and we'll be watching closely to see what awakens next beneath the full moon. Like this video if the howl of the werewolf echoed through your spine. Tell us in the comments, What would you do if your bloodline was cursed? And share this story with someone who still thinks legends are just stories. Some creatures don't stay buried. Finally, if you've got the nerve, subscribe to MFAR Midnight Horror and hit the bell. That way, when darkness calls again, you won't be alone in the woods.